I now welcome our third panel, Representative Fry and Representative Jayapal from the Committee on the Judiciary. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Representative Fry, I welcome your testimony.
During the attack, thank you. Should know that by now, Madam Chair. During the attack, Kayla tried to call her boyfriend to help her. Her boyfriend later found her not breathing, strangled to death, with her own iPhone cord wrapped tightly around her neck. Authorities later determined that Kayla also had been sexually assaulted. Before leaving her lifeless body, her assailant robbed her of the $6 in cash from her purse. Kayla's murderer, Walter Javier Martinez, was a 16-year-old Salvadoran national. Martinez illegally crossed the southwest border in 2022 during the Biden-Harris administration. He admitted to authorities that his aunt paid $4,000 to a so-called guide to smuggle him from El Salvador to the U.S. border. As is required by law with most unaccompanied alien children, Walter was transferred to the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the Department of Health and Human Services. Once in the care of HHS, thousands of taxpayer dollars were spent to find a sponsor for Martinez and provide him with housing, food, counseling, schooling, clothing, and medical services. Unfortunately for Kayla, according to information in Martinez's case file obtained by the Judiciary Committee, the Biden-Harris HHS was far more interested in determining whether Martinez identified as transgender or intersex and asking if he, quote, felt safe telling people about his gender identity than they were in finding out if he was an MS-13 gang member. Those records also show that instead of conducting a criminal background check for Martinez or identifying his gang tattoo, HHS ensured Walter had multiple opportunities to paint rocks, make art therapy bracelets, create a vision board, whatever that is, write in his gratitude journal, practice mindfulness, play positive bingo, and receive counseling on topics such as discrimination, racism, and xenophobia. The Biden-Harris administration's HHS even described Martinez in the records as friendly, positive, helpful, and a unique individual. Clearly, they were wrong. The Biden-Harris HHS then promptly placed Martinez with a sponsor, purportedly his first cousin, although according to the records, his sponsor submitted unclear pages with missing information and even told HHS she didn't have legal status in the country. None of it mattered. Martinez ran away from the sponsor's home just after 1 month of being with that sponsor. His sponsor later told HHS after the murder that Martinez left because he wanted to, quote, do what he was doing in his home country, get in trouble on the streets and hang out with gang members, end quote. Only after Kayla's murder did any government official even attempt to find out whether Martinez had a criminal record, and it wasn't even our federal government. It was the local police, Madam Chair. The local police investigating Kayla's murder learned from Salvadoran authorities that Martinez was indeed an MS-13 gang member with a 2020 arrest record for illicit association with the violent gang. Why did no federal official try to determine the criminal history of a 16-year-old Salvadoran national entering the country illegally? Because the Biden-Harris administration just simply didn't care. Instead, Secretary of HHS, Javier Becerra, cared only about moving hundreds of thousands of UACs out of HHS custody as quickly as possible. As a New York Times report noted, which is no bastion of conservatism, Becerra pressured HHS employees to expedite UAC processing and placement, saying, quote, if Henry Ford had seen this in his plants, he would have never become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line. Because of this careless approach, necessary checks about Martinez's background and potential affiliation with MS-13 were never performed. The Kayla Hamilton Act will require UACs to be assessed not only to ensure that the UAC is protected from exploitation, but also to determine if the UAC presents a flight risk, has a criminal history, or presents a danger to themselves or others. For those UACs 12 years of age or older, HHS will also conduct a screening for gang affiliation. including assessing a UAC for relevant gang history, criminal history, or gang tattoos. If HHS had conducted this screening of Walter Martinez, Kayla would be alive today. Additionally, under this legislation, if the checks performed reveal that a UAC 12 years of age or older satisfies certain factors, like having a gang tattoo or a criminal history, the UAC will be placed in a secure facility rather than imported into the interior of this country. The Kayla Hamilton Act will also ensure that UACs are protected, which I think is a very noble part of this bill, from those who wish to exploit them. We know that there are missing children in this country because of this program. This legislation closes a loophole currently in law that allows illegal aliens to sponsor UACs. The bill also includes common sense reform that bars UACs from being placed with convicted criminals. And finally, the bill ensures that HHS conducts a thorough background check of a UAC sponsor and adult who reside in the same home. Currently, they do not do that. The bill makes certain that UACs are not placed with a sponsor until HHS actually receives the results of the background checks. That's the whole purpose of doing the background checks, like checking the sex offender registry or the FBI National Criminal History. Waiting on background checks results before placing a child is simply common sense. With that, Madam Chair, I see the gavel.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Rules Committee. Kayla Hamilton's death was a senseless tragedy, and my heart goes out to her family and loved ones. And I understand the impulse to do something, anything, to try to prevent something like this from ever happening again. But responsible governance means working together to create sensible solutions, not weaponizing tragedies to push through political priorities. Under the guise of so-called preventing child trafficking, this bill would subject unaccompanied kids to abusive practices like invasive body searches and make it harder to release them from detention in spite of the protections that Congress established in the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. That was a bill that passed both chambers by unanimous consent. I do wish we were working on real reforms that are needed, especially as Trump has set aside long-standing protections for unaccompanied children. Right now, these kids are spending more time in government custody than ever amidst Trump's campaign of mass kidnappings and disappearances. This bill, unfortunately, does not fix anything. Instead, it doubles down on cruelty, subjecting children to strip searches to look for, quote, gang tattoos, and would force them into prison-like secure facilities if they're deemed to have a gang tattoo or be involved in a gang. Unfortunately, we've seen what this administration considers to be, quote, gang tattoos. They sent Jersey Reyes Barrios, a professional soccer player who was tortured by the Maduro regime, to the notorious Salvadorian gulag, CICOT, saying that his tattoo of the Real Madrid soccer logo meant that he was Tren de Aragua. The administration claimed Neri Jose Alvarado Borges, a baker and an asylum seeker, was a member of Tren de Aragua due to his tattoo honoring someone with autism, and disappeared him to CICOT also without any due process. This bill also denies kids the ability to be placed with their parents if they are not U.S. citizens or green card holders. Preventing kids from being placed with their relatives will deny them the ability to go to loving homes and force them to languish in government custody for months. This will not help prevent child trafficking. It will help promote family separation. This bill also forces HHS to tell DHS the immigration status of anyone who lives in the home of a kid's sponsor, aiding the administration's efforts to prioritize deporting moms and dads over murderers and deadly criminals. Since President Trump's inauguration, countless stories have emerged about ICE agents arresting parents and conducting intimidating so-called wellness checks as a pretext for taking unaccompanied children and their guardians into custody. This bill is clearly aimed at supporting that project so that ICE can meet Stephen Miller's cruel 3,000 immigration arrests target per day. The Trump administration already treats unaccompanied kids horribly, and this bill would only make things worse. I have observed the kids' docket at immigration court. I went there and sat for several hours, and what I saw would horrify most Americans. kids as young as 5, one clinging to a stuffed animal, trying to represent themselves in complicated legal proceedings in a language that they struggle to understand. Can you imagine a 5-year-old child who doesn't speak English trying to represent themselves in court, being instructed by a judge that you, as a child, have the right to call witness and cross-examine the government's witness? Going up against a seasoned ICE trial attorney, a full-grown adult who has gone to law school and challenging what they say about you? It sounds like an absurd nightmare, but it is reality for too many kids. Our system already does a great disservice to these kids, and this bill would make it worse. It's also laughable to claim that the Republican Party is focused on eradicating child trafficking. Under President Trump and Secretary Noem, the agents in Homeland Security investigations who are normally tasked with going after child traffickers have instead been detailed to enforcement and removal operations. So instead of working on targeted takedowns of dangerous criminals, they're patrolling the streets to go after random people they think might be undocumented because they look Latino or they speak Spanish. Homeland Security investigators worked approximately 33% fewer hours on child exploitation cases this year compared to last year. And if we really want to protect kids, we need to address the #1 cause of death, not immigrants, but guns. This week, following the anniversary of the horrific shooting at Sandy Hook, we are mourning the death of innocents at 2 mass shooting events. Here in America, at Brown University, 2 people were murdered, and an entire campus was traumatized, including several students who had previously been in other school shootings. Despite the president and the FBI claiming otherwise, the shooter is still at large. And yet, I don't see any effort to take up the issue of sensible gun reforms. These mass shootings at schools across the country cannot be normalized. We also witnessed a horrific anti-Semitic mass shooting at Australia's Bondi Beach that left 15 people dead, including a Holocaust survivor who died saving his wife. The only reason the death toll wasn't higher there is because Australia banned semi-automatic weapons and the shooters could only fire 1 bullet at a time. Gun violence like this is rare in Australia because it has some of the strongest gun violence protection laws in the world, and still they're talking about taking further action to regulate guns. That's what we should be doing if we care about protecting our kids. I look forward to answering your questions, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Jayapal. I'm going to defer my questions for a moment, and I'll recognize Mr. Norman. Do you have any questions, Mr. Norman?
I thank both of you for being here. Representative Fry, I think you're familiar with a tragedy that occurred in our district where you had a young lady who was a mother of 2 driving to a birthday party. She was randomly targeted, surrounded, and shot to death by a group of illegal aliens led in by Joe Biden. 3 of those individuals entered the United States as unaccompanied alien children, UAC. They were ages 13, 14, and 15. If the previous administration had conducted thorough vetting of unaccompanied alien children before release to sponsors of the community, don't you think that Ms. Larisha may be still alive today?
Well, I do, and I think that's the whole point of the process is that I think there's an assumption when an unaccompanied alien child comes into the country that they're an innocent child, right? And many times maybe they are. But in the case of Kayla Hamilton in Maryland or Ms. Thompson in South Carolina, these individuals are not vetted, right? They come in here, there were 465,000 UACs during the Biden-Harris administration. None of them, very few of them, received any background checks. Many of them were placed into communities all around the country with sponsors who were not well vetted at all, didn't even have background checks on them. And then they go and cause any number of mayhem. There's stories all around this, like almost every week, Mr. Norman, about people that should not be in this country committing unspeakable atrocities, even those who are considered UAC. So I think it's very plausible that a background check may have revealed something. And Ms. Thompson in South Carolina, a mother of 2, I think, or of small kids, would still be alive.
Well, don't you think it makes sense for those over the age of 12 to look for tattoos that may indicate gang membership or some type of affiliation with, that do routine killings?
Yeah, I mean, I don't encounter, Mr. Norman, I don't think anyone on this committee encounters kids at 12 years old who have, a tattoo on their forehead. And so if you see that, maybe that's a little bit of alarm. Maybe we should ascertain what that actually means. If they're coming, maybe we should call their country of origin. That didn't even happen in Kayla Hamilton's case. It was the local cop after Kayla was murdered that called down south and said, "Who is this kid?" And they said, "Oh yeah, he has a prior criminal history. He's been associated with these gangs." If we had done that, if we had a little bit of common sense in this country, maybe Kayla would still be alive today. Maybe Miss Thompson would still be alive today.
Well, this mother was shot in Lancaster in her car. She was driving, he had followed her, pulled up beside her, and then just decided to take her life. So, well, thank you for putting the bill up. I appreciate your efforts on this, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you both for being here, and my views are more aligned with Ms. Jayapal's. I mean, I think what happened to Kayla Hamilton is a terrible tragedy. No parent should ever have to go through that. No child should ever have to be subjected to that kind of violence. And there are things that we can do, I think, to better protect our community. But I fear that too often what is being brought before this committee is more for political purposes than it is for actually trying to make a difference. When I'm thinking about protecting the people of this country, I did a community meeting in my district, and people were asking why was there no outrage or limited outrage when President Trump pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was one of the biggest narco traffickers in the world, sentenced to 45 years in jail, flooding our streets with drugs that were killing our kids. Silence. I mean, I get people who still ask me, why can't we get the Epstein files released? The survivors, the people who were victimized by him, are demanding it, and yet, it took almost a miracle to get Congress to act. And then, we're now being told that, there's all these efforts to frustrate their release. I mean, it's like sometimes I just think that Washington is out of sync with where most people are. Look, we all need to do a better job of protecting the people of this country. But at the beginning of this hearing, I expressed my frustration that we're doing all this today, and bills that are basically jeopardize our environment, and bills that are giveaways to big mining companies or oil companies. And every town hall I've been doing, and we did one in Pennsylvania together over the weekend, people are worried about losing their health care. I mean, millions of people are going to have to make a decision that they can't afford health insurance and will go without. And by the way, that's not only cruel, because I think health care ought to be viewed as a human right. For those who are fiscal conservatives, let me tell you, that's expensive, because then their health care is emergency room care. And it's the most expensive care we can have. And we can all talk about how you want to change the system and all that kind of stuff. Let's have that conversation. But right now, we have 4 days left. We have 4 days left in this session, and it is unlikely we're going to do anything to help anybody keep their health care. And I find that just so disappointing. And I don't know whether you guys do town halls or not, but if you do, this is what people are talking about. Affordability, not just of groceries, not just of housing, but health care. Health care. So, again, I appreciate you being here, but, I do not believe that the priorities of this Congress are the priorities of the majority of people in this country. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Scott, do you have any questions?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, am very concerned about health care, and I represent the Irwin County Hospital. And there have been a lot of false accusations made by people in this committee today. And I'd just like to ask you, Ms. Jayapal, you've made a lot of statements about things that happened in Irwin County. Can you tell me exactly how many medical procedures were done and what the peer review said about those procedures?
Well, I'd be happy to go back and look at the exact data. I don't have it in front of me, but what I know is that we had proof, including from people who had had those procedures done to them.
No, you didn't.
We did,
did
sir.
not.
I'm happy to give you all
What?
the documentation of it. And that facility was appropriately closed down because women were having medical procedures done to them without their knowledge. And they were waking up from those procedures and finding that
You make up-
suddenly
this
they
is
were
my
not
time. You make up
able
and say
to
anything. There were no
have
medical
children.
procedures done at that
Wait.
facility.
Sir,
There were no
you're-
medical
you're-
procedures done at that facility. They
You're
were all,
incorrect, sir.
they were all done at the Irwin County Hospital. Are you aware that the physician actually won the lawsuit against NBC Universal? There were 2 medical procedures done, 2, both of which were deemed under peer review to be medically necessary. You should check your facts.
I am happy to go back and do
Yeah,
that,
you
and
should
I'll
check your
provide you
facts.
with
But-
the
but bottom
information
line is,
that we had.
You, like the majority of the members of the Progressive, just say whatever you want to. You just say whatever you want to. You defamed a man who is a legal immigrant, by the way, in the United States of America. You went on a tirade about one of the local small-town facilities that I represent, and everything you said was a damn lie. It was a lie.
May I respond,
Madam Chair, with another lie, 2 medical procedures, both seem deemed to be medically necessary under peer review. Madam Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Madam Chair? I've never quite seen an exchange like that. I
Yeah.
think the gentlelady is entitled to,
Mr. McGovern, I'm going to
all right, thank you.
allow Ms. Jayapal a brief response.
Well, let me just first say that it is inappropriate for you to call a member of Congress a liar, and you should take down your words for that. Secondly, I will say that I'm happy to provide all of the testimony from the individuals who had medical procedures performed on them. And you can judge for yourself. But I do not appreciate, Madam Chair, being called a liar. I don't think that's appropriate in this committee. I demand that the gentleman take down his words.
Madam Chair, I do not object to my
Mi-
words
mi-
being taken
Mr.
down. I should
Scott,
not have called her a liar.
Mr. Scott, just a moment. Ms. Jayapal, I'm happy for you to present to the committee whatever evidence that you have. You know the rules and regulations. You have 5 days to present that information to us. Now I'm going to recognize Mr. Scott because I believe he wants to say something to you.
Good. Good, I appreciate that.
I apologize for calling you a liar. I do believe the things that you said were a lie. I will tell you, Madam Chair, I will ask if I called her a liar. I apologize to the committee, and I will not object to those words being taken down, and I look forward to the presentation of the evidence.
I have a procedural question. Does that count?
Yes, it counts. Yes, it counts. Thank you very much. Ms. Scanlon.
I'd like to yield some time to Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, I don't really think that's good enough, to be
I
honest
don't
with you.
either.
Because basically it's the same, you're saying the same thing. You know, and we have heated exchanges in this committee. And believe me, there are lots of people that come before this committee that, you know, I need to be restrained in my response because they're so over the top. But I don't believe I've heard anybody ever call a witness a liar in this committee before.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Scott taking back his words. If we were on the floor, Ms. Jayapal, that would be sufficient. I have been in the chair when people's words have been taken down, and I understand what happens in that case. I'd like to move on from this situation and recognize Ms. Scanlon for her questions.
I don't even know whether any of our options that we would normally take advantage of on the floor are available to us today, but it's not just calling somebody a liar, it's calling their words a lie. They're both, to me, equally offensive. And I would wish the gentleman would withdraw all of those statements. I think that would be more appropriate. He could disagree with the statements, he could ask for more information. You know, he could say he has other information that contradicts it, and we can then have that debate. But calling somebody a liar or calling what they just said an absolute lie is the same thing. And I think those words should be stricken from the record.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I'll give Mr. Scott does not wish to respond.
Madam Chair,
Oh, you do.
this is my district. It's less than 30 minutes from where I live. The medical procedures, there was peer review done on the medical procedures. They were deemed to be medically necessary. The physician won a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against NBC Universal for all of the lies that NBC Universal told about him, and referring to him as a uterus collector, I believe is what they were referring to him as. So,
Those were not,
there are no, those were not your, that's not what you said. It was what NBC Universal said. But no medical procedures, no surgical procedures are done at the Irwin County Detention Facility. They were all done at the local hospital.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Scott. Ms. Jayapal, I will recognize you.
thank you, Madam Chair. I've been on your committee. I was on your committee for years in Ed and Labor. I've served on the Judiciary Committee for years, including under Republican chairs, and in very contentious debates. And never have I been called a liar. And I will just say that there are a lot of facts that the gentleman is misrepresenting. First of all, I never said those words, uterus collector. Secondly, the lawsuit was settled. There are numerous lawsuits that are settled where there is no finding of wrongdoing. It is a settlement. And there are numerous reasons why that lawsuit was settled. But we can go into all the facts, but for a colleague on the other side of the aisle to sit in this committee, call me a liar, and call the things I say lies is absolutely inappropriate. And I ask you, Madam Chair, because you have been fair when I have asked you these things before, not in this situation, in committee, that he take down all of those words, including that the things I said were lies. That is simply not true. I don't accept it, and I don't appreciate it. I will move on, but I would like to ask that he take down those words.
Well, Mr. Scott has apologized to you, and
And so those words will be stricken from the record, that I am a liar and that what I said was a lie?
I believe that they will be
Great.
as a
I
result
appreciate
of that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think maybe Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, and I appreciate your testimony, Representative Jayapal, because you have spent a great deal of time in the field of immigration law. Like you, I have seen situations where children have been forced to represent themselves, where our government has not treated children well. I appreciate your refocusing the attention on the fact that this bill, while it trades on someone's tragedy and the tragic loss of life of the young woman for whom it's named, it does not address the underlying issues. And I appreciate your mentioning the fact that it can lead to invasive body searches for children in U.S. government custody, that it prioritizes deportation over actually finding appropriate placements for these folks, and that it has come in the context of a diversion of resources to actually protecting Americans from drug trafficking, from human trafficking, from national security threats, because so many of our government's resources have been diverted to trying to detain and deport 75,000 folks who are in this country with no criminal record whatsoever. So I appreciate your testimony on that, and I would just ask if you have anything else you would like to add.
I think I've said everything that I have to say on this bill. It really doesn't do anything to fix some of the real issues. In fact, just recently, there was an article about 400 kids who were kept over the time that they're supposed to be kept in these facilities because of these mass detention policies. over 225 judges have ruled against this mass detention effort of this administration, including 23 judges appointed by Donald Trump. And I think that we need to refocus, including allowing our federal law enforcement to focus on child exploitation. Resources have been taken away from that to focus instead on these kidnappings and disappearings. And I appreciate all your work on immigration on the subcommittee as well.
Well, like you, I've seen the trauma that is inflicted on children when they're detained in basically prison-like settings by our government. And so I appreciate the work you're doing there, and I appreciate the candor of your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Roy, you're recognized.
I thank the chairwoman. Mr. Fry, my recollection is that in the administration under President Obama, there was a significant number of unaccompanied alien children that were being known at that time to ride on top of train cars and otherwise be in danger as a result of pressures and people moving unaccompanied alien children into the United States for a variety of reasons. Is that your recollection as well?
Yeah, yes, sir. And there was actually an escalation in the number of unaccompanied children that surged during the Obama administration, and it's continued even under Biden.
And then we obviously went to the President Trump's administration, and there was a growth of the population at that point as well. But then the Trump administration reacted and took policies to try to stem the tide of the flow. And the point being that there's a very large number of children, I'm hearing about the treatment of children, who are known to, on a bipartisan basis and by objective media, to be sold into the sex trafficking trade as a result of the flow across our border when the borders are left open. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And under the previous administration, we had the New York Times reporting of the problems that we were dealing with. The New York Times, as you pointed out in your testimony, right? Hardly a right-wing conspiracy magazine, right? The New York Times was talking about and reporting on Becerra purposely trying to push as many people, as many children out as possible to get them out of detention facilities, out into the community, into living with other people. But in doing so, what happened? We ended up with a fairly large number of children that were unaccounted for, unable to be found. The OIG report, the Inspector General of DHS, found that there were hundreds of thousands of children that they couldn't locate. Doesn't mean they were all lost. It just means they didn't know where they were.
Right.
Is that fair and accurate?
That's totally fair. In the case of Kayla, as an example, he ran away from his sponsor a month after he got to his sponsor, and the government didn't even check on him until after he murdered Kayla. And that was several months later. And so they didn't know where he was. His sponsor never reported it. They never did a wellness check on him to see if he was still with the sponsor himself. And I just look at this and go, what are we doing to ourselves right now? Can we just have a little bit of common sense back into this discussion?
And we were talking about somewhere in the order of 400 and something thousand unaccompanied alien children during the Biden-Mayorkas regime, correct?
That's correct, 465,000.
And I remember when we were debating H.R. 2, and we were debating H.R. 2 in the Rules Committee, we were debating H.R. 2 in the Judiciary Committee, and we were being told, under no uncertain terms, that the only way to stem the tide and the flow of individuals into the United States and what was happening with respect to unaccompanied alien children and people generally was that we had to have comprehensive immigration reform. And it was supposed to be, of course, the bill that the Senate was putting forward, right? Remember that? It was always, this is the only possible way that we can stop this.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Okay, did we pass that?
No, we did not.
Right. And what has happened in the last 11 months?
I think it's like the president said when he addressed the country when he first came in, you don't need a new law, you just needed a new president.
Now, to the point of the law, this law, as well as laws like H.R. 2 and generally, why do we need these laws if at the moment we have a responsible administration that is stopping the flow at the border, working to identify children, as Tom Homan and the president have repeatedly said, trying and actually successfully locating the children because it's a now priority to find them? Why, though, do we need this law Why would we need laws like H.R. 2 going forward? Is it not, and then I'll let the gentleman respond, is it not to prevent the kinds of abuses of parole, asylum, the use of unaccompanied alien children as effectively political shields in the future? Is it not to be able to make sure that Kayla Hamilton is not, a future Kayla Hamilton is not murdered, so that his wonderful mother who came and testified to judiciary committees, I'm sure some of my friends in judiciary remember, when she lost her daughter because of this, that we would avoid that in the future, that we would put provisions in place to ensure that we can protect against this in future abuses.
No, I think that's exactly why we should close some of these loopholes. If you look at this, for instance, children were released to sponsors without even background checks being completed. So we sent children, unaccompanied alien children, to sponsors when we have not even ascertained if they have a problem with the sexual registry, their FBI background check. We put kids out into our country with sponsors that we have no idea who they are, right? That we have not adequately done a background check on them. So it's a danger to kids, one. And two, this whole exercise was entirely preventable. We already do, I heard about this, kids are going to be traumatized because we're going to screen them. We already do medical screening of children when they come into our country. All we're saying with this bill is, hey, while you're doing that medical screening, why not look and see if they have a gang tattoo on their forehead? And if they do, maybe that's a problem, and maybe that's a reason why we would hold them in a detained, safe facility for them and everybody around them so that we would not have Kayla Hamilton. So, Mr. Roy, I think you're exactly right. Let's get to the bottom of this, and let's close some of these loopholes and have a little bit of common sense.
So in summary, and over 5 minutes, this bill is designed to protect Americans from dangerous UACs through making sure we're properly vetting, and this bill is designed to protect children who are currently in danger because of our broken system, correct?
Absolutely, both.
All right, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roy. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. And I think with all of this, we have to begin with extreme family, because this should never happen to anybody. And we should always do whatever we can to protect our children. And I think we should do whatever we can to protect all children in the United States. And that's why one of the things, moving on from that basic sense of humanity of who are we, I am very worried about how we are failing to protect our children in the United States right now. Madam Chair, I'd like to enter into the record November 16th, 2025 article from the New York Times. Under President Trump, an agency intended to keep Americans safe has diverted resources from combating child abuse, trafficking, and terrorism.
Without objection.
Okay. And this article goes into depth about a study of how Homeland Security agents investigating sexual crimes against children have been redeployed to immigrant crackdowns for weeks at a time, hampering their pursuit of child predators. It points out how federal efforts to combat human smuggling and sex trafficking have languished. The time spent investigating child exploitation cases has dropped 33%. Haney Farid, a computer scientist who actually works on the software to try to go after these kind of cases, I'm going to read his quote. "You can't say you care about kids when you're diverting actual resources that are protecting children." The report goes on. And I think it's also important to know that this diversion of federal resources to protect children, to protect women from trafficking, that the people they're arresting do not have criminal records for the most part, right? But it's this diversion of resources. Representative Jayapal, can you speak to your concern about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned this in my opening testimony that the resources that are being diverted from working on actual child exploitation cases are substantial. And we have consistently seen that this administration is not focusing on the worst of the worst. I actually think when President Trump said he was going to do that, a lot of people in the country said, great, we all want that. We all want that to happen. But what is actually happening is over 73% of the people who have been detained have absolutely no criminal record whatsoever. And of the 27% remaining, most of them have minor traffic violations. Now take it to the children, because that's what we're talking about here. We are not talking about just screening, and I really appreciate Congressman Fry's wanting to bring a bill to protect somebody in his district who lost a child, who had a child murder. That is horrific, absolutely horrific. And I think that as a mom myself, I know that that's a very, very legitimate human response. We all want that. But what this bill does, Representative Leger-Fernandez, is to actually subject everyone from the age of 12 up to strip searches. This isn't just about looking at a tattoo on a forehead. This is about a strip search. It doesn't define gang activity, and we know that it uses tattoos as the primary determiner when we have seen over and over again the cases where a, quote, tattoo was deemed a gang tattoo, and that was certainly not the case. And with adults, these people were sent to CCOT, to torture prisons. And so I think that that's the point, is that this bill, as well-intentioned as it is, does not actually fix the problem. It makes it makes the treatment of children, unaccompanied children, significantly worse. And that is my concern with this. You know, the broad authority to detain an unaccompanied child that is in this, and then to not place them with their family member if they're not a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, that is also a problem. So there are numerous places where I think I understand the intention, but the bill is not what it seems to be.
And I think that that's it. We're not questioning the intent. I know the representative cares deeply about federal law enforcement. We've talked about that. We're working together to try to get better training for federal law enforcement officers. And so it is just that we need to make sure that there aren't these consequences that are not intended. And then I think we put those resources back.
That's right.
We need to put those resources back into fighting sexual exploitation and trafficking. And with that, Madam Chair, unless there's anything else, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leger. Thank you, Ms. Leger-Fernandez. Mr. Griffith, do you have any questions?
I do. So, Mr. Fry, before you joined Energy and Commerce, I was chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over the OR Office of Refugee Resettlement, which has jurisdiction over the children who are unaccompanied that come into this country. And I've got to tell you, you were absolutely right when you said that we weren't doing any background check at all. What they checked on the people for was just to see if a peoplefinder.com type of background check showed anything. They did not do a criminal background check. They did not do an FBI check. And it was absolutely appalling. To Secretary Becerra's credit, he came in and let us grill him on it, and as a result, they finally, as checking the home the children were going into, they said they would do a virtual check. So they would have, somebody zoom in to the location and say, this is where we're at. Now, I've got to tell you, having worked in the domestic relations field for a number of years when I was practicing as an attorney, any judge in the Commonwealth of Virginia who gave custody of a minor to a child under those circumstances would be no longer a judge, because they would be seen as having not done their duty to protect the child. The benefit to the child was virtually negative, virtually nil, and in fact, and it drove me crazy, they didn't notify the Department of Social Services. So if they placed child A into Roanoke County, Virginia, they didn't notify the Department of Social Services in Roanoke County, Virginia, that child A was coming there. They didn't notify the school system. I would have accepted either one. So the schools didn't know to look for these people, these children, and the social services didn't know that there was somebody to check on. They weren't doing background checks on the people at all. We're not even talking about, anything that would be considered standard for a child in the United States of America. And I said at the time, and I'll say it today, Madam Chair, and I want to know if you agree with me or not, Mr. Fry. I may not agree on how that child came into the custody of the United States of America, may not agree that they're here. But once we take custody of that child, we have an obligation to protect that child. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I think to your point about what state judges would do in a family court case, I mean, you've practiced law, so have I. I mean, the rigorous enforcement, and almost like super technical way in which states come in and make sure that that home is suitable for a child. Sometimes we can think that that's overbearing when you have a really good set of parents that want to adopt somebody as an example. But here, we just gave them to these sponsors without any regard to who actually lives in that house. We didn't do any background checks, by the way, of the other adults that lived in the house. We didn't even do background checks. We didn't even wait for those to come back.
We didn't even do peoplefinder.com or some other type. I'm not saying they used that one, but some internet system on the other people who might be living in the house. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I mean, a Google search is not sufficient, right? You got to do more.
I agree. And I will tell you, Madam Chair, it was really appalling because not only did the New York Times report, I think we lost about 75,000 kids where we didn't know where they were. We had no idea. But their investigation showed that there were 12 unaccompanied minors who crossed the border and placed into the custody of the ORR who were sent to the same address with nobody checking. And shockingly, they ended up doing child labor under the table and not having the ability to get to school and just being used for child labor. I don't think the New York Times report had anything on sexual human trafficking, but they certainly had it on labor trafficking, and we allowed that to happen. This bill closes that door mostly, does it not?
I think it absolutely does. And I think when you talk about sex trafficking, I mean, there was a case in Texas most recently where an individual came forward and said that her two sponsors abused her for years, right? So these are the stories that come out of that because we don't do things smart in this country. We should do them a little bit smarter and protect.
Well, it's not only not doing them smart, this is outright negligent and not up to the standards that our court systems usually hold for parents in this country, much less parents of any other people coming into this country. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. And in conjunction to what Mr. Griffith's saying, what you're saying, Mr. Fry, I believe what Ms. Jayapal was saying, I want to associate myself with the comments that Ms. Leisure-Fernandez said. What we really want to care about is the safety and security of those children, as well as the victims of the people who were categorized as unaccompanied children who really were not here for positive purposes. I think there's a lot of sympathy to go around here for people. And I agree with Mr. Griffith and with Mr. Fry. Our government has handled this situation. The Biden administration handled it terribly in terms of letting in all these unaccompanied people, children as well as adults. And a lot of harm has been done. And I appreciate what Mr. Fry is doing to attempt, at least in one instance, to try to get some control over this. But there was a lot of blame to go around during the Biden administration in terms of how children and adults were not taken care of. So with that, the committee stands in recess until